Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And right now, and we've talked about this a few times in the past few months, India has the second worst debt problem in the world, second only to Italy. And as this article from Zero Hedge says, step aside, Italy. India is emerging as ground zero of world's biggest NPL crisis. And as the article goes into, according to Bloomberg, India's $1.7 trillion formal banking sector is presently struggling with $210 billion in bad loans, most of which are concentrated within its state-owned banks. During the 2018 fiscal year, growth slowed to 6.7%, down from the previous year's 7.1% back to its levels from 2014 before Modi came to power. The state banks have been so badly mismanaged that some analysts say the country's banking crisis is an opportunity for private sector banks, as CNBC reported. And I quote, if you take a 10-year view, currently the private sector bank's market share is 30%. Probably it will become 60%. Sukumar Rajaj, Senior Managing Director at Franklin Templeton Emerging Markets Equity, told CNBC. And this is something that we should all be paying very close attention to, folks, because India is also not just ground zero for debt and insanity like that, but also the cashless society, which is, as I've gone into many times before, in my personal opinion, is the desperation move made by big banks and central banks and governments around the world to mitigate the coming inevitable collapse of these systems, as well as, you know, the world reserve currency, the US dollar, and the global financial system. I feel like it's Armageddon for them, and they know it, and they are going to do whatever they can to protect themselves and their ability to force everyone into debt servitude. So John, can you go into a bit about what's happening in India? I know you wrote a CMIT article about it.
Yeah, actually I just did this morning, and some of my points is it's of course, I said surprisingly most of the bad loans were made by state-owned banks. Surprised that the government had their fingers in that. And of course, I also wanted to make a point where they were talking about actually creating a new bank and take all the bad loans in it. I call it a fake bank, and then put all the fake assets, as Robert Kiyosaki said, into the fake bank, as they call it, of course, a recapitalization, which is also familiar with the same word as a bail-in or bailout. So just another word for it. And with 11.6% of all these loans that are made in India being bad loans, that's, Italy is at 14.4%. So think about that. And Italy is causing havoc all over Europe because, of course, banks like Deutsche Bank and Societe Generale have borrowed tremendous amounts of money to them. Now, of course, in India, they're really struggling, and they've also been struggling with implementing the cashless system over there because people are kind of back almost again to use cash because there's still cash, around. So it's kind of a stupid semi-attempt because they didn't go all the way that Kenneth Rogoff says that we need to do in order to implement it. Now, of course, with all the money, that have been slushing around in India as well, like I'm looking at M3 money supply, that's all the money that have been created. Most of it is just debt. And when you look at that versus if you put the actual M3 money supply together with the Rupee historical value, they look really similar. And it's funny how like an increase in money supply makes the Rupee go down in value. That's very, very surprising, isn't it, Josh?
It's absolutely insane. And this is all the results of vast central planning and the usual central bank insanity. And we have to remember that India is the second most populated country in the world. It's huge. It did at one time have an incredible free market in, the street markets throughout India. There's a great success rate for young people. And I think a huge amount of the population was under 18. And, a lot of speculation about India is going to be the next powerhouse. They're doing amazing things, all that kind of stuff. Well, in comes even worse central planning and government regulations. They demonetized. They tried to ban black markets. They gave all these homeless people bank accounts as if it was like a good gesture when it was really just ways to track everyone and keep track and be able to stop people from making transactions on the black market. And on top of that, we see this move towards just making everything completely cashless. cashless. And we see that with the Aadhaar system in India. And we have to remember that if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through those banks via digital transactions and legal tender laws and all that crazy stuff, it's never your money. It's always a bank's. And you are essentially enslaved to the banking system, a debt slave forever. And it stops you from being able to do runs on the banks. It stops you from being able to really have concerted effort or effect on the markets or on the monetary system when you want to pull free and decentralize your life and rule yourself, because they basically have cracked the whip, and it's 1984, folks, on crack, and they're trying to implement this kind of stuff into the special drawing rights at the IMF, which is interesting because, you know, we hear a lot about, you know, Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff is a mark of the beast. Meanwhile, India, China, Sweden, Australia, the places that are most cashless in the world are dramatically attempting to regulate and attack cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency exchanges, which goes to show they don't really like decentralization too much. And why would they? They are focused on a banker coin that is just routed through the banking system, so people never have the money in their hands, and there isn't a cap on creation. There's vast quantitative easing, there's vast fractional reserve lending, and no one can do a run on the bank, and they can bail in everything. And then there's no insurance or almost nothing on the money that's stolen from you. Or perhaps they'll do what China is doing, the most populated country on the planet, and do a social credit, sesame credit kind of situation like them, where they just stop you if you don't like the government and you say mean things about the government. They'll just stop you from being able to buy things. This is authoritarianism, folks. John?
Yeah, well, when you look at India, you know, India has, of course, tried to fight with China to become, you know, world superpower. And that's what they've been doing. They've been borrowing money, just at vast scales. And, of course, China has done the same thing. And I think China is pretty close, if not even worse, than India, but they never, you know, share any data that are, you know, real with anybody. So
wait, a communist country won't be transparent? What?
Surprise, right? So I just wanted to mention two more things before I'm going to wrap this up. And it's when you look at the Indian rupee, I wrote in my Steemit article, since March 1973, it has dropped 89.56% in value. And then, of course, not to mention, like, there was actually an attempt to recapitalize the banks back in November last year by Moody, and he tried to put in $32 billion dollars worth of rupees to recapitalize these banks that were struggling. But they're still interesting. At that time, it was $207 billion that was the problem. Well, now it's 210, so it didn't really fix anything. It just got worse. And of course, these bankers used that recapitalization to maybe pay themselves some really nice wages and all that. So what we got to go back to, and who knows how much they actually securitized of these loans, and what is slushing around there in the world economy of derivatives on all these debt. Who has a clue? But it all comes back to India is one of the places where I believe that actually, you know, have a foundation of real money, because Indians, they believe in gold, and they use it for, of course, when anybody gets married, you know, you always get gold. And every Indian that I talk to out there, they tell me, like, I could ask them, you know, so do you keep like gold around? It's like, oh yeah, I get that, you know, when I got married, you know, we had X amount of gold that, you know, our family keeps around. It's wealth insurance, they tell me. It's like, really? Like, there's so many people that understand this in India, and that's a good thing still. But that's what the government is trying to manipulate everybody into with this cashless society, to forget about the gold, because if people understand that gold still is money, there is no space for fiat currency in this world.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've noticed that people from India are some of the most self-sustainable people historically, the people that have worked the hardest historically, people that will go put up with any kind of condition to be successful. And we see that in places like Canada, the United States, and elsewhere, how many people from India rise to success because they, well, it's just in their blood. And I think that that's an important point to make, because they are trying this massive complex out in, like, like a guinea pig state in India, where they're basically destroying the self-sustainability and independence of people in India, one of the most sustainable countries ever. So I think that this is a telltale sign of what exactly they are really trying to do. The real story behind the curtains, the real wizard behind the curtains, if you may, where it's basically just an attempt to stifle some of the most innovative people on the planet, because, you know, those are the people that they really need to drive down into the mud, because, you know, they've already done a really good job on the United States and Canada and you know, Britain and Germany and Australia and other places, forcing people into dependence. And now it's really time for them to just destroy India and, you know, lead into the IMF's global order, if they ever are successful in doing so. I say they won't be, but, you know, if takes us being educated first. And before I go back to you, John, I just want to mention, with this said, talking about self-sustainability, that is a solution to this problem in the first place. You guys need to educate yourself, like I mentioned, and you need to be self-sustainable and independent and never dependent on those that are dependent on your dependents, which is the banking system and the government and the central bank, of course. On top of that, it all plays into itself. You guys need to be independent, self-sustainable, food, water, shelter, self-defense, so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, and of course gold, silver as wealth insurance, not an investment, folks. Stop telling me that you haven't made much money on your gold and silver in the past several years. It's not about that. It's about protecting your purchasing power as the fiat system collapses, as it always has, always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. We've seen this enough times. And with that said, you know, there's also cryptocurrencies out there that have great fundamental value, but look for those that are innovating and really creating a new space in the market, on the competing currency market, and not just with currency, but with decentralized blockchain technology. Decentralize everything, rule yourselves, and don't fall into the trap, because they are trying to coax you to go into the van and get the candy, basically, is what they're doing. Metaphorically, they want you to go into that van, take the candy because it sounds real good, and then you're done. You don't even want to know what happens next. You guys need to protect yourself, protect your wealth, protect your family, be independent. That is what humanity is all about, for the basis of freedom itself is individual responsibility. John?
Well, the RBI is going to completely devastate the Indian economy by continuing to bail out or bail in, or whatever they call it, recapitalization. You just like to change words, of course, so nobody have a clue what it is. But I just want to say one last thing about, you know, I have so many great Indian friends and very smart individuals that are highly successful business people from all over the world that I know in India. And not to mention that, Josh, I just wanted to mention one last thing. This was Canada Day here. I remember you went out and asked if taxation was theft, and surprisingly enough, it was a little Indian guy that
9-year-old,
a 9-year-old that was the only one that actually kind of figured out that taxation is theft.
Well, yeah, he's like, well, they take the money, and it's like, yeah, theft. And, you know, and while everyone else has been so indoctrinated, and, you know, that's a great example. I told his mother that she should be proud. But anyway, there's so many things coming at us, and it's hitting us fast. The fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the markets as well as the monetary system. So you can't put a date on the crash. You just know it's going to happen. And for that reason, you need to be prepared and educate yourself, because with education comes ambition. And with ambition comes success, and with success comes action. You are able to be dependent on yourself, independent of this massive complex, this cartel that wants nothing more to shove you down that bottomless pit of debt, forcing you to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing you into perfect servitude, of course. So it comes down to you, and only you, and that's the way life is. I mean, everything in life, it comes down to you. Don't wait for someone else to do it. You have an idea, do it. If you have ambition, do it. Don't stop and don't wait. Life is too short, and you need to take charge of your life, because you only have one. And, you know, that is where you gain success. That is where you rise above all of the massive monetary calamities, or any calamities that come at you in life. And that is how you get above it, and you become successful, and you can actually make the most out of your life. So this is not just a monetary thing. This is self-help, really. I mean, folks, you guys, it's up to you and no one else but you. And stop making excuses and don't make yourself a victim, because if you tell yourself you're a victim, then you become a victim and you are the victim of yourself and no one else. You all have a way to get out of this system, and I really hope that with the information that we spread, you take that and do something with it, because I would love nothing more to talk to those of you in India that are watching and trying to make a change in your life and trying to get around this massive system that is just absolutely abhorrent and trying to enslave so many people into debt servitude.
Yeah, let's just all make changes in our lives so we can move towards a future where we have voluntary societies and we actually have a free market that are able to work in coercive with each other all over the world, and move towards a peaceful world where there's nobody trying to kill or destroy each other, which we have at all these nation states and these governments and banksters that are running amok with the money around the world. Let's become true free individual human beings and succeed in life, so we don't have to be dependent on this failing system.
Absolutely. It all comes down to that non-aggression principle and, of course, the individual demand of your dollar on the market, or actually, let's just push the dollar out of there. Your currency on that market and that competing currency on the market. Yeah, exactly. Real money. And with that said, I mean, I'm going to wrap it up. I was about to complain about how hot I am. I'm sweating here. But then again, a lot of you are watching from India, so I shouldn't complain up here in Canada. But anyway, thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized by YouTube as they bring in the ADL to flag all of our content as hate speech. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So don't forget to check us out there and find us at Anarchapulco 2019. I know it's early, but this is such an exciting event coming up with Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, Larkin Rose, Jeff Berwick, all the usual characters, and it's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there. Make sure to check the link for Anarchapulco below and use promo code WHAM to save as much as 15% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.